We're going to use the SQ3R method, specifically focusing on the S and the Q. The 3R is a great method that you can use with the questions themselves, but for now we're going to focus in on the SQ. And we're going to use this method with one of the major genres that you're going to be encountering, which is informational. Now, I wish that I had the paper version. I wish I had a video where I could have you watch how I annotate and the ways that I annotate questions and answers, but I don't. This is all that I have, just access to the College Board's site and some sample questions, which you too have access to. And anyone can get on College Board and practice themselves. But let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to switch over to a student voice and imagining that I'm a student taking the SAT. And so as you hear me say some things, you might, hopefully it may or may not make sense, but I hope you get the general gist. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so I'm just opening this SAT and looks like I'm just now starting, and there was one passage I saw that was a literature passage that was called Ethan Frome, and I don't know, literature is not something I'm ready for right now, so I went ahead and skipped that. There was a speech from Barbara Jordan, and it looked like it was some sort of speech given to some sort of congressional hearing or something or whatever. So I skipped past that. And there was another passage on transportation and traffic, and it had some graphs. And I don't think I really want to get into that. And so now I'm on this one. I took a quick peek, and it looks like it's something about birds. So, and I love birds. So I'm just going to start the SAT. I'm going to start with the passage that I think I'll be most interested in, which is this one right here. And looks like there are 5 questions. I'm going to take a quick peek at all of them because I remember that what I was taught was to find the ones that are easier. And they're either the question looks like it could be attacked, or the answers look like they can be defended or found or rationalized in the passage. So let me see here. Let me take a couple of quick notes here. Passage 1 is adapted from Susan Milius, A Different Kind of Smart, from 2013 by Science News. It's like some sort of science journal or science magazine. Passage 2. Oh, okay, cool. We have a paired passage here. It was adapted from Bert Heinrich, The Mind of the Raven, Investigations and Adventures with Wolf Birds. Okay, so this is a paired passage both about, birds. Looks like it birds. Okay, cool. Let's take a look here at the questions. So I'm not going to read the passage yet, although I definitely am going to read the passage. It's just not right at the first start because I was taught to look for the questions that I think I can answer most easily. All right, question 20. Within passage 1, the main purpose of the first 2 paragraphs is to, I kind of like this question because it asks me to just stick to this part right here. But if I take a look at this answer, the answers are tough. So I might put this on the back burner, even though the question doesn't look too scary. It still has quite a lot. So I know that if there's only one part that would be wrong, it would make it incorrect, imagining that these were the words that were okay. So I don't even know if that's correct or not, but I know that's a lot to get through. So I'm going to put that on the back burner, even though it looks easy, but I don't think it is. According to the experiment described in passage 2, I'll say, okay, so there's some sort of science experiment here. Whether the ravens continued to show interest in a formerly new object was dictated primarily by whether the object was, okay, I love this question. This is a great question to start off with. I'm going to put a star there because it's a sequence question or some sort of It's like there's an experiment, and looks like the birds did something with an object. Okay, I'll come back to that. And I like that it's only one word for answers. Let's take a look at the next one. The crows in passage 1 and the ravens in passage 2 shared which trait? Okay, so I know that if it's an informational passage, that I'm going to be asked about relationships. So relationships is basically like like cause and effect, sequencing, like order, or compare and contrast. And it looks like they're asking me what do they have in common. I also know in informational that I'm going to be asked to what are the main claims or the main point of the author. I also know that I will be asked to summarize summarize what happened in, for instance, what are the main points? What's the main point of this passage, and then also what are some secondary points? I know that I'm always going to be asked. Oops, that's a huge V. I'm going to be asked about vocabulary, or what does that word mean, and I'm always going to be asked to provide the evidence and what line best supports. These are all parts. These are all important types of or main domains, or like the main sorts of questions that SAT asks about. I'm definitely going to pick up question 22. This looks like it's like I'm going to have to know both of those passages really well. So that's not going to be the first one I do. One difference between the experiments described in the two passages is that unlike the researchers discussed in passage 1, the author of passage 2, again, I think this is one that could be easily found because there just there's not a whole lot there that could muck up the answer. And it looks to me like even in the answers, like I think I know almost all of those words. So I would definitely put question 23 as one that I'd attack at the top of the list. And 24. The main conclusion presented by the author of passage 2, is the main conclusion presented by the author of passage 2 consistent with Morgan's canon as described in passage 1? So it looks like I'm going to have to know the main claim for passage 2 and seeing if it agrees with Morgan. And so that is what informational asks me, compare and contrast. But I already picked my favorite. Looks like that's going to be a toughie because you have to know what the main conclusion was here for passage 2 and whether it matches what Morgan says. But I know that this is the one I wanted to attack first, which is question 21. So now that I've gone through the questions, now I'm going to survey the actual passage. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to skip right down to passage 2 because it doesn't ask me if it has anything to do with passage 1. It's just specific to passage 2. So I'm going to do a tiny bit of annotation, just not a lot, because that's not something that's definitely something that's going to take time, and I don't know if it's going to pay off to do that kind of thing. According to the experiment described in passage 2, whether the author's ravens continue to show interest in a formerly new object was dictated primarily by whether that object was. So there's some sort of object that they might be interested in, and so it's asking, like, were the ravens interested in it? Like, they weren't interested in it, but then they were later because it was one of these things. So let's go through. For 1 month after they left the nest. I led my 4 young ravens at least once and sometimes several times a day on 30-minute walks. So this guy looks like he's taking his ravens for walks. Okay. During these walks, I wrote down everything in the environment they pecked at. In the first sessions, I tried to be teacher. I touched. Okay, so he's touching specific objects, sticks, moss, rocks, and nothing that I touch remained untouched by them. That's interesting. So he's touching things, and when he touches it, that they touch it too. They came to investigate what I had investigated, leading me to assume that young birds are aided in learning to identify food from their parents' examples. Oh, okay, so it's like he's the raven dad, and they are his babies, and they are copying him. They also, however, contacted almost everything else that lay directly in their own paths. They soon became more independent by taking their own routes near mine. So it seems like he would go down this path and they would follow along with him, but then like they would also go off and then join him back on that little path. Even while walking on their own, they pulled at leaves. They soon became more independent by taking their own routes near mine. Even while walking along their own, they pulled at leaves, grass stems, flowers, bark, pine needle seeds, cones, clods of earth, and other objects they encountered. Wait a minute, I'm going to stop right here for just a second. This is all detail, and I think it's interesting, it's fascinating, but we can't get too mired in the detail because that's not really what they're not asking. And SAT does not usually ask about little details. I know that it's asking me something about an object that something about interest in objects, but other than that, it's not asking all these. It's not going to ask for a list of pine needles and seeds. It's not going to ask all of that. Okay. I wrote all this down, converting it to numbers. After they were thoroughly familiar with the background objects in these woods and started to ignore them, I seeded the path. Okay, wait a minute. We're getting into something new. There's new information here. I seeded the path we would later walk together with objects they'd never before encountered. So it looks like this is around the question. So it looks like he put things that they'd never encountered. Some of these were conspicuous food items like raspberries, dead mealworm beetles, and cooked corn kettles. Others were conspicuous and inedible. Oh, wait, there's a word here, so I'm wondering if that's connected at all, so I have to be careful here. Others were conspicuous and inedible, like pebbles, glass chips, like glass, red winterberries. Still others were highly cryptic foods, such as encased caddisfly larvae and moth cocoons. The results were dramatic. This is the experiment that we were talking about, this author. So it looks like I'm just going to just say it in my head. Looks like he took these birds on a route with him. They'd walk and they copied him, but then he started putting other things there. Some of them were conspicuous. I know conspicuous means that they stood out, and then others were conspicuous, but they can't eat them. So he put both of those things on this trail. So here we go. Here's the important part. So we're going to find out what the results were here. The 4 young birds on our daily walks contacted the new objects preferentially. They picked them out at a rate of up to tens of thousands of times greater than background and previously contacted objects. So it looks like they like new objects. The main initial criterion for pecking or picking anything up was its novelty. So the first thing that we discovered from this, the first thing was that if it's new. In subsequent trials, when they previously, it looks like this is a question, the answer, the question they're asking me. When the previously novel items were edible, they became preferred. Okay, that's the other thing, the other result. And the inedible objects became background items. Okay, so we have 3 main results. Just like the leaves and grass and pebbles, even if they were highly conspicuous, these experiments showed that ravens' curiosity ensures exposure to all or almost all of the items in the environment. So it looks like they are noticing. That's his main claim. And the conclusion of that experiment was that they notice things. They like to see they paid more attention to it, if they can eat it. And then finally, they just start ignoring things like, whatever else he put there that were not edible. Let's see. According to the experiment described in passage 2, whether the author's ravens continue to show interest in a formerly new object was dictated primarily by whether that object was, well, we just found it right here, if they could eat it. So it looks like it's this one. Let's see. Whether it was plentiful. Well, it doesn't say anything about plentiful at all. That didn't even appear. So conspicuous. So that's one thing I'm going to be careful of, because it said some, like, it looks like it says conspicuous. It said conspicuous a lot of times, right? Okay. So I can't just pick it because it appears once, because I know the SAT tries to trick you in that, to say, hey, here's the word. Did you find it? And it appears here. It's matchy-matchy. No, we're not going to do matchy-matchy, because it's not, that wasn't even, it doesn't even make sense. They don't pick it because it's conspicuous. And because it's natural, again, that didn't even appear at all. So it looks like the answer is A. And let's take a look at the answer. The answer was A. And so I notice here that what we have is are the rationales for why the others aren't correct. And you can also see that, just like I mentioned before, that this is a matter of this happened. This is what happened, and then this other thing happened, right? So that's why it's easy. Again, this doesn't weigh any more or any less than any other question, just because it's easy. The main thing I wanted you to notice before we close out this video is I wanted you to notice how we did the S and the Q parts of the SQ3R method. I wanted you to notice how I bagged the easy questions by going through and marking them. I also wanted you to see, however long this answer is, it needs to, you need to be quite careful, because if these are really long answers, it only takes one or two little words to make that entire answer incorrect. And then I also wanted you to notice that I did a little tiny bit of annotation, especially down here. As I was noticing, I skipped past all of the details and got right to the important parts. I want you to notice that I came up with the answer here before I started to go through and start to eliminate. And I also hope that you noticed that that I had in my head, I knew that informational is going to ask about relationships, it's going to ask about claims, it's going to ask about hypotheses. It's not going to ask about little details. And so hopefully this is all helpful to you as you attack the other questions on your own.